Welcome everyone to the Festival of the Unexceptional 2024. Welcome to this second part of the Festival of the Unexceptional, where I'm going to make it a bit more personal, which I think fits the general idea of this show perfectly. Sometimes the stories and memories people have about the cars is a lot more interesting than the story of the car itself. See, most of the cars are from the 1970s, 80s and 90s. Old and classic cars to me, but a trip down memory lane for people like my dad, who came along with me, and regarded many of these cars as still pretty new, although that pretty new is already 30 years ago. So allow me to give you a bit of an overview of my family's car history, as quite a few cars were there that my family have owned in the past. Even I get a chance to be a bit nostalgic, if that's even possible for a 27-year-old. Anyway, let's have a look. We start with my grandfather. As I explained before in one of my latest videos, car ownership was still considered very much a luxury for many Europeans until the post-war economic boom of the 1960s. His first car? A humble Fiat 600, sometimes loaded up with a family of 4 and luggage going on vacation trips. You start to wonder where it all fits. But by the 1970s, my grandfather bought this. Yes, this is a Morris Marina, the poster car of everything that was wrong with the British car industry in the 70s. It sucked in every way, rattled, leaked, and attracted falling pianos everywhere it went. And yet my grandfather didn't care. He liked the looks, and I can understand. I find it quite an attractive car for the time period, and I detect some slight American influence in the design. The color is exactly the same as the one my grandfather bought it. But my grandpa became a seasoned marina owner shortly thereafter. According to the stories, after driving it through the rain, you could put on your swimsuit and snorkel, as the interior was a swimming pool, and everything just felt sloppy with vague seat comfort and car suspension. An accident with a freight truck sent the car to the scrapyard. Grandpa bought Opels from here on out. Talking about Opels, let's move down the generational ladder. My father's very first car was an Ascona A. The British equivalent would be something like a Vauxhall Viva. And people in the neighborhood already complained why such a young guy like my dad needed such a big car. But by the late 70s and early 80s, his next car was this machine right here. BMW 316. Just like that, but slightly more red. Now, my dad is not much of a classic BMW guy, but he loved the car for its solid handling, solid build quality, and a dashboard that was positioned towards the driver, giving you full control over everything. Overall, everything just felt solid, although one cylinder had no compression, and one of the struts was broken, resulting in some bad handling and driving characteristics. Still, that wouldn't stop my dad from tinkering around with the car, like installing a custom sound system with speakers installed in both doors, like you see everywhere today. Fast forward to the new millennium, when my dad was given a Ford Focus station wagon as his new company car. The Focus was a brand new model, a successor of the Escort, and sporting the new and radical New Edge styling philosophy. My father loved the 1.8-liter diesel version, as he found the Ford to be a well-handling car. All I remember as a kid is that he sometimes used to get off-road and plow right through a little field, much to my amusement. After a couple years, the Focus was replaced by a newcomer, a French Renault Scenic. A car that already leaked oil on the showroom floor. Overall, not a bad car, as my father always had a soft spot for minivans, and the original Renault Espace from the 1980s in particular. He liked the Scenic for its spaciousness and practicality, finding storage space all over the interior, and the only major downside were the seats and the seating position. After 2 hours of driving, he had cramps everywhere. He eventually sold it for his only real true love, Volkswagen Transporter vans, and I don't really have any particular memory of it either. Much of my childhood from that point onwards is filled with Volkswagen Transporter vans. My father currently owns a Volkswagen Tiguan. But what about my mother's cars? Well, she started out in a humble Toyota 1000, in other parts of the world known as the Publica. But by the time I grew up, she owned a Daihatsu Charade. Now, this is full-on nostalgia for me, and I'm glad that I saw one on the concours area of the show. The Daihatsu Charade. I remember playing around in the back seat of one of these. I remember the smell of the interior, the manual window cranks, and the typical noise the three-cylinder made. I remember its sunburned red paint, you know, the typical faded red paint that almost turns pink. And I remember the wide horizontal taillights, and oh, how we used to joke about that name. It sounds that you were about to sneeze. Daihatsu. One carefree little car. Now, the car was eventually replaced by an Opel Corsa, sold in the UK as the Vauxhall Corsa, which you saw quite a bit actually on the show. The Corsa was already getting old at the time we bought it, and came in a boring silver color and the typical bubbly 90s styling. When we bought it, something always seemed wrong with the transmission, and I remember always getting sick while riding in the car's back seat. The Corsa was soon replaced by a bunch of Volkswagen Polos, including a fun version known as the Cross Polo. But as of today, my mother has been happily driving around ever since in a bright green Nissan Micra, dubbed the Green Monster, from the late 1990s. One happy-looking fella and a trouble-free car, since there is not a lot that can go wrong with it. It does have electric windows, but you do have to adjust your mirrors manually. Before I bought my first car, I mostly drove around in her car. The steering is heavy and so is shifting the gears, but the view around you is tremendous. But if you want to know more, my very first car review was actually my mother's Nissan Micra. I mean, you have to start somewhere, right? And that review is already, 5 years ago? Oh, how time flies. My personal car history is not as long or extensive, however. I bought my first car in 2019, and that was a 2005 Hyundai XG350, which I also made a review about. Now, I absolutely love the car, even so much that I bought another one again after a brief affair with a Chrysler Crossfire. And so I took it to the show, much to some people's surprise and admiration, as they're just as rare in the UK as back home. So who knows what stories I will tell in the next 20 or 30 years when a beater like my car is seen as a collectible classic. You'd think that might never happen, but oh, how we laughed at 90% of all the other cars at the festival of the Unexceptional. A truly exceptional event.